Good evening, everybody. Today we have a very interesting book discussion, The Life and Times of David Hare. The author is our own Sarojesh Mukerjee, who really does not need any introduction. I'll just say that he was the founder of Cambridge School in Calcutta, and he teaches economics and at times international history. And the David Hare's portrait, by the way, is here in our room number 13. With him will be in discussion our Vice President, Mr. Sumit Ray, who is also the President-elect of the club. So I will request Sarojesh and Sumit to please come and take their seats here. I'll request everybody to switch off their cell phones, please, or put it on silent mode. After the discussion, we'll throw it open for questions and answers. Over to Sumit.
Thank you, Pathuda, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think you've appropriately put it, our very own Sarojesh. And not only has he been an active member of the club, he's also been instrumental in driving the library subcommittee very, very hard for many, many years. I have had the pleasure of working with him. And I've also had the pleasure of him sharing with me at the time when he was planning to write this book. And I think Sarojesh reached out and said, and may I share the story of the photograph as well?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. And I've been privy to read the scripts when he was in the draft stage. Very, very intrigued by this topic and what he had taken up. And then, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, this is the book. And Sarojesh shared the cover design with me. And I remember there's a photograph of him in the inside back cover. And I said, Sarojesh, it's about David Hare. It's a serious book. Your face makes it even more serious. Can we have a slightly smiling, nice photograph of yours? He said, you think so? I said, yeah, I definitely think so. Because people do look at what the author looks like. And I said, you're a good-looking man, and put on a smile. And I'm so glad, Sarojesh, that you did that. And he took my advice, and the book was published. And of course, it was launched some months ago. And we've not had the pleasure of hosting him at the Bengal Club. But when he, I think, spoke to Pathuda, and we were very keen, because celebrating our own at the Bengal Club is, I think, a very special library talk. So put your hands together for our very own Sarojesh.
Thank you.
So we're going to make this the format will be short questions because we have a lot to hear from him. And my job as the moderator is just to kind of pique his interest, or trigger him to kind of, and I'll share another interesting format. But I think to begin with, Sarojesh, a very, very, no-brainer question is what, I know you're an educationist, you're with the school and all, and he's an but what prompted you to write this book on David Hare?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you, Pathuda. Thank you, Sumit, for those very generous introductions. Now, before I answer Shumit's question about what prompted me to write this book, let me tell you about an anecdote about how English first came to be spoken in Bengal. This is according to Babu Ramkamal Sen, who was a very authoritative figure of his day. And according to him, the English first appeared in a ship to trade around 1620 in what is now present-day Hooghly. And they did start trading with the two most prominent trading families of the day, who were the Baisaks and the Sets. But there was one problem. The problem was that they could not understand each other. The English could not understand Bengali, and the Bengalis could not understand English. As a result of which, the English made a request to send a dobashi, an interpreter, to the ship so that transactions could be facilitated. Now, the Sets and the Baisaks mistook that as dhobas, that is washermen, and sent up a few washermen to the ship. The English were taken aback by the people who had come aboard, but they could do nothing about it. So the first Bengali speakers of English turned out to be those washermen. And Ratanlal Roy, who was one of those washermen, was the first Bengali appointee of the East India Company. But I say this about how English first came to be spoken in Bengal, but my interest was how English first came to be taught in Bengal, which was not such an easy question to answer, because there are many theories about how that happened. There are some views which, along the lines that the British rammed it down the throats of Indians. There are others which say that the missionaries went about it in a slightly less than above board way and led to that. And there are others which say that it is Indians who clamored for it. These are all various shades of truths. There is a little truth in all of this, and correspondingly that means there is a lot of untruths in this. So I set out to find about how English education was first started in India, which meant Calcutta, because Calcutta was the capital and the nerve center at that time. And during my process of inquiry, I found that that story could not be told without David Hare, because he had been so instrumental in setting up educational institutions of all kinds, schools, college, medical college, that it would not be possible to tell the story of the start and growth of English education without David Hare. And that's how I came to write it.
Wonderful. And I think, Sarojesh, we'll make this a little interesting, the session. And what I propose to do, ladies and gentlemen, is that he's spent a lot of time researching, and he's done a lot of deep research, if those of you have not read the book. So I'm going to request Sarojesh to take some of the passages that he's very, very close to, because he can't read the book. It's important for you to get a glimpse of what he's written in the book. And based on that, I'll put myself in a difficult seat and ask him a question after he's read that passage, which will give us the thought as to what has led him to write the book or that passage or where he took it from. I hope that's okay with you. It'll just become more interesting. So Sarojesh, over to you for your first favorite passage from your own book.
I'll start with the prologue of the book, which is about a funeral. On the 2nd of June, 1842, a funeral procession passed through the streets of central Calcutta, the like of which was neither seen before nor later. Rarely, if ever, had the city turned out in such numbers to mourn the death of a foreigner. The hearse, which contained the mortal remains of David Hare, started around 5:30 p.m. amidst heavy rainfall. It traveled from Mr. Gray's house in Koilaghat, where Hare had lived since he had sold his watch business to Mr. Gray many years ago. The cortege then wound up its way to College Square. Accompanying their most beloved friend and benefactor were thousands of mourners from all walks of life. They included not just children, many of whom would not have gone to school, and men who would not have studied in college but for Hare, but also their parents, relations, and many other ordinary people, numbering about 5,000, all sorrowful, sobbing, and weeping. The Bengal Spectator reported in its notice of death that their countenances exhibited a deep gloom of sorrow and absence of mental serenity. Some of them were examining his body, some dwelling on his unparalleled benevolence. The question arose of where to bury him. The Christian burial grounds of the city were made unavailable, as he was not a believer in the Christian faith. His final resting place was therefore in the then compound of Hindu College, now Presidency University, on land that he had himself donated. The tomb was paid for with money instantly raised from Hare's friends, mostly Indians and students.
Which brings me to the most pertinent question. A man of that stature and 5,000 plus mourners at that point would have been maybe half the population of the city today. What made him so popular? Why was there a clamoring of, you talked about children and people who were not educated. Why was it? Was it a spectacle, or I presume it's just a cottage? So what was his popularity and what made him so popular that thousands had actually gone for his funeral?
The short answer is that he had acted as an educator and a humanist. Not only had he set up institutions, but he had actively nurtured students to join those institutions. But the question arises as to why did he have to do that? And the answer lies in the state of education before Hare started doing his work. So here is a very short glimpse of how schools in Bengal used to be before Hare arrived on the scene. Neither history nor geography were taught, as were not any sciences, or even vernacular literary works, for the very good reason that none had been written. Even the Sanskrit that was taught was basic. The Vedas, Vedanta, Gita, and the Puranas were not known to the Pandits. The very narrow focus of non-religious learning was on the memorization of mathematical tables, the rules of grammar and forms of address, none of which were either expected to or resulted in any intellectual curiosity or achievement. The schools had other damaging characteristics as well. For example, corporal punishments that caused both humiliation and great physical pain were deeply entrenched in the system. These included boys made to bend forward with bricks on their backs, made to stand on one leg, applications of nettles dipped in water on their bodies, or packed in a sack with nettles or a cat and rolled around on the ground and knocking heads severely against each other. So, combination of two reasons in answer to what Sumit asked. The present system was terrible, and two, he did wonderful things. Therefore, the turnout of such proportions at his funeral.
Wonderful. Would you like to read your next passage?
The next passage is about David Hare arriving in, in Kolkata. But before that, just a very, very short introduction about Scots. Hare was a Scotsman. Now, Scots occupied a disproportionately large amount of the British establishment in India. 40% of East India Company staff were Scottish, which is a very high number, given that Scotland was a small part of the United Kingdom. But the Scots were very prominent. The first three presidents of the Indian National Congress were Scot. The reason for which the English got trading permit in India was because a Scottish doctor treated the Mughal Emperor Farrukhsiyar successfully and was told you can have what you want. So the Scots were a very prominent, right, thank you Sumit, very prominent, and a lot of them came to Calcutta. One such Scotsman who came to Calcutta was the 25-year-old David Hare. Not much is known of his antecedents except that he was born on 17 February 1775 in a village in Scotland. Most scholars consider 1800 to be the year when Hare arrived in Calcutta, but it seems more likely that his ship cast anchor at Diamond Harbour on 4th May 1801, after taking 4 months and 19 days to arrive, having sailed around the Cape of Good Hope. Like many of his brethren, he had come to Calcutta in search of a living, in pursuance of which he started a business of watchmaking and repairing at Larkin's Lane, which exists even now. Not the shop, but the street, shortly after his arrival. He had taken up residence in Hare Street, which, contrary to popular impression, is not named after Hare. Although watchmaking was his first business, Hare was more interested in the study of society in Calcutta. He engrossed himself in the daily life of the local people, participating in local festivities, naches, which were local dances, and tamashas of the streets. He was passionate about children and presented them with toys. This affection slowly intensified his sympathies for the natives. He then got interested in education. And I want to read out a very small passage by him. So I am quoting from David Hare. India was teeming with production of all kinds, that her resources were inexhaustible, that her people were intelligent and industrious, and were possessed of capabilities, if not superior, at least equal to other civilized inhabitants of the world. And that centuries of misrule and oppression had destroyed her learning and philosophy and buried this land in almost total darkness. So he arrives in Calcutta to make his living as a watchmaker, which is not unusual because lots and lots of Scots used to do that. But then his life takes a very, very unusual turn, which is that he gets more involved with the society in which he has come to reside and discerns that without education, the Indian population would forever remain stricken in poverty.
Wonderful. And therefore, when we're talking about, Scottish watchmaker coming, getting involved with Indian society in the 18th century and then setting up schools and things and obviously leading to the Hindu college. Can you share with our audience what are the institutions and what led to the establishment of these institutions?
Yes, Hare's watchmaking business really took on the form of a salon. It is true that he sold watches, but he also invited many people over to his watch to discuss the issues of the day. And therefore, he made very many friends in Indian society, the most prominent of which was Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who had just come to live in Calcutta at that time. Now, let me read out from the book about the founding of Hindu College. Hare mooted his idea of an academic institution. He had already thought that we are going to set up an English college that would offer modern English education with Ram Mohan, although accounts vary about the exact circumstances when the Vidyalaya, which the British called Hindu College, and which was to become Presidency College and finally Presidency University as it is known today, was first discussed between the two. In the scholar Shibnath Shastri's account, Hare and Ram Mohan became friends very soon after the latter's arrival in Calcutta. Hare was present in a meeting of the Attiyo Sabha, a discussion group set up by Ram Mohan. After the meeting, Hare brought up this idea about imparting English education, and it was decided that efforts would be made to start a school for the purpose. Sarojesh Mukerjee, a member of the Attiyo Sabha, was also present in that meeting, had acquired an English education, and was already a frequent visitor in the homes of many high-ranking Englishmen. He relayed the proposal of Ram Mohan Roy and Hare to establish an English school to Sir Edward Hyde East, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which was then located in Calcutta. So this is the story of the finding. But here is another account from the rival camp, from Reverend Alexander Duff. The system of English education commenced in the following very simple way of Bengal. There were two persons who had to do with it. One was Mr. David Hare, and the other was a native Ram Mohan Roy. In the year 1815, they were in consultation with few friends as to what should be done with a view to the elevation of the native mind and character. So the two get together. They invite other Hindu gentlemen of Calcutta to come and discuss and contribute to their cause. And then suddenly, with no warning, there's a huge surprise. The Hindu gentlemen come. They say, we are fine with this idea. This is great, but we will not have anything to do with it if Ram Mohan Roy is associated with it. And the reason being was that Ram Mohan Roy was a truly secular figure of his day, And according to the Hindus, he hobnobbed with Muslims, had Muslim meals, this, that, and the other thing. So the prickly issue then arose as to what is to be done. Hare persuaded Ram Mohan Roy to opt out of the founding of the Hindu College, and things proceeded after that without him.
Which leads me to a very interesting question. In your book, The Life and Times of David Hare, you have a byline which says, the first secular educationist of India. And that's a very interesting word you've used. I mean, you're an educationist. Why the insistence of the word secular? Because sometime earlier you said that, he was not a devout Christian, and then you say he's secular. So could you take our audience through what is the thought behind him being the first secular educationist of India?
Yes, I have to first explain that during that time that we are talking about, which is the first half of the 19th century, secularism meant a very different thing than what it does today. The Muslim intelligentsia in Calcutta during that time was inert. It is their empire which had been supplanted by the British, and they were smarting under that insult, and not just that, with the demise of the Muslim kingdoms went the patronage. So Muslims were not employed as much as they used to be previously. So the Muslims do not enter into the secularism equation. What does enter into the secularism equation are the Christian missionaries. Now, you might be surprised to know that Christian missionaries had been forbidden to enter India. This is why, as a result of this ban, that they had come and set up shop in Srirampur, which was a Danish colony, to escape the ban on them by the East India Company. But gradually, that began to be relaxed, and after the 1813 charter was renewed, they were allowed to come and work in Calcutta. Now, their influence was very, very strong. They set up a large number of educational institutions, not before Hare, but after Hare, Scottish Church College being one, but there are many. But Hare was militantly opposed to the idea of Christianity in the classroom. And he went to extreme lengths, which was not an easy thing to do under those, in those days and under those circumstances, to keep all religion, Hindu religion, Christian religion, every religion out of the classroom. And that is the reason for calling him India's first secular educationist. I can read out a passage if I can manage to find it, about how extreme he was. Sorry to keep you waiting. This is the account of a person whose name is Lal Bihari De, the Reverend Lal Bihari De, who became the Reverend Lal Bihari De later. Lal Bihari De, a student of the General Assembly's institution, a missionary school, wanted to gain admittance to Hare School, and in the hope of eventually being sent up to study in Hindu College on a scholarship, as in fact many students of David Hare's schools were able to. This is his recollection of his meeting with Hare. I was shown into a room upstairs where I found Mr. Hare sitting at a small table. His face was towards the south. A Bengali somewhat older than I stood before him. His hat stood in the middle of the table. Lal Bihari De, I wish, sir, to be admitted into your school. Mr. Hare, what school do you attend? Lal Bihari De, I am reading now in the General Assembly's institution. Mr. Hare, what books do you read? Lal Bihari De, I read Marshman's Brief Survey of History, Geography, Euclid. Mr. Hare, do you know the seventh proposition of the first book of Euclid? Let me see you demonstrate it. Go to the board. Which Lal Bihari De does. And then he says, you seem to be well taught. Why do you wish to leave the General Assembly's institution? Lal Bihari De, people say there is a better teaching in your school. Besides, I have a great desire to go to Hindu college from your school. Lal Bihari, I'm sorry, Hare, sorry, I cannot allow you to do so. Lal Bihari there, no sir, kindly admit me to your school. Mr. Hare, you read the New Testament, you are half a Christian. You will spoil my boys. I won't take any of them into my school. Lal Bihari there, I read the New Testament because it is a class book, but I don't believe in it. I am no more Christian than this boy here. Mr. Hare, all Mr. Duff's pupils are half Christians. I don't take any of them into my school. I won't take you, you are half Christian, you will spoil my boys. So therefore, he will not even take students from Christian missionary schools. He will not appoint missionary teachers. There will not be the hint of religion in the curriculum taught in his schools.
Wow. Wish Mr. Hare was here with us today. But having said that, we started off with the Hindu College, Sarojesh, but he also expanded it a lot into schools. So could you throw a little bit of light as to what led him to kind of go down to schools? And obviously, with the Hindu College, another great institution he was associated with is the medical college. Can you share with us what led him to get into the setting up of both schools and the medical college?
Let me divide them into two and talk about the schools first. One of the most arresting sights of Calcutta during the last 25 years of Hare's life was his daily travels across the busy and congested streets of central Calcutta. He would be crouched, not too comfortably, I'm quoting here from a contemporary source. He would be crouched, not too comfortably, in a palanquin stuffed with books, pencils, medicines, and loose cash, and taken from one native mohalla to another. To the refrain of the palanquin bearers would be quite added that of a few urchins and poor boys running around, me poor boy, me have pity, me take in your school. So here is Hare going around central Calcutta in a palanquin, trailed by boys who are asking him to take him, me poor boy, me have pity, me take in your school. For fame had spread through the city that here was a sahib who in his daily round would arrange books or schooling for the indigent, the poor student. The reason for which the clamoring boys ran behind Hare's palanquin was that very soon after the establishment of Hindu College, which was an institution meant largely for the children of the Bengali elite, Hare took it upon himself to make modern education readily available to the masses. So this is why Hare set up it's inconceivable, 6 schools spread over Calcutta, all of which he ran personally. He was not a classroom teacher, but it is he who took a responsibility for the children. And again, this is what was found after Hare passed away about a particular school in Arpuli. It appears that the pupils of this school have hitherto been admitted entirely by Mr. Hare, that they have paid nothing for schooling, books, or stationery, that discipline was maintained by Mr. Hare personally, and that he paid from his own funds any incidental charges in excess of the government allowance of 500 rupees. So, there's yet another aspect of Hare in the running of his school, which in fact...
Before that, so he was not in favor of Christian missionary students. For the schools, did he admit the students, Muslim students as well?
Muslim students?
Yeah.
There weren't many Muslim people residing in Calcutta at that point of time. And even if they were not interested in participating in British education for the reasons that I told you.
Right.
They went to their own schools,
Madrasas.
own religious schools, madrasas. Okay. I just want to read you one more part about Hare's administration of his schools. Hare's all-encompassing care for his students, and even those who were not, was legendary. He would leave his residence in the morning in his famous palanquin and spend his day personally supervising the running of his schools. He used to keep himself informed about every single student in each school and was particularly concerned if any of them were absent. The job of his servant, Kashim Ali, was to keep a daily record of students who were not present in school and report to Hare about the reason for the absence. If any of them were ill, Hare would visit them at home with medicines and nourishments. In fact, he seems to have contracted the cholera from which he died by tending to a sick student at his home. Hare would feed the poor, hungry children at his own cost. If they visited him at home, then the first thing he would ask them was whether they were hungry, and then send them out with a handwritten order to the nearby sweetmeat shop, which entitled them to eat as much as they wanted for free. He was a stickler for cleanliness and would stand at the gates of his school with several buckets of water, soap, towels, and a basin, with which he would personally wash the hands and faces of those children who were in need of it, a practice that came to be known as the David Hare tradition. He even fined parents of such students in order to discourage the scourge of bad hygiene. Hare used to frequently escort his students to their homes after dark to make sure that they were not assaulted by drunken European sailors or even the occasional tiger. The sight of Hare walking in central Calcutta with a club to ward off any danger to his students was both familiar and reassuring, for he was known to use his sturdy walking aid frequently for striking assailants and driving them away.
Wonderful. So, obviously, he did a lot of benevolent work, and he would, as you said, distribute books and food and things. Where was the source of fund that he came? I mean, that's a very interesting question. One is to set up, and two is the kind of fund that he did, because I'm sure he wouldn't be able to charge much fees to the kind of students that he was recruiting. So can you throw some light on Hare's funding?
Yes. He not only did he not charge, I mean, the question of charging did not arise because the pupils that he were educating came from very, very poor backgrounds. As I was quoting a few minutes ago, he supplemented government grants with his own money. Now the question is, where did the money come from? Well, Hare came to India in 1801 and set up the Hindu College in 1817, if I recollect properly. At around 1820, he sold off his watchmaking business to his partner, Mr. Gray. So therefore, he got a substantial amount of money from the sale of his business, and presumably he would have made some money during 20 years of running a business. The question is what he did with his money. It seems that he spent his entire savings on these schools, so that he came to near bankruptcy at the end of his life and had to be appointed as a magistrate in the small causes court, so that he would get some very small amount of 400 to 500 rupees per month. So in the meanwhile, what he had also done is that, and that I think was the practice in those days, was to buy several pieces of lands with his earnings. So during the last 20 years, when he was engrossed in his educational activities,
sell that land,
but also donated land to the Hindu College. Because if he had not donated land to the Hindu College, it might not have survived. So this is how he essentially spent his life savings away.
So, and what else did he do? I mean, education, obviously, his primary, we talked about education. So besides education, if you can throw some light about the man himself, what were his other interests, and a little bit about his personal life. Why did he remain single? Was he married? What kind? And if you can share that with the audience.
With your permission, Sumit, could I
please do.
Read out a few pages rather, about the medical college?
Yeah, please do.
Which we haven't covered yet. Hare saved the Hindu College from many disasters during his when he stewarded it. There were financial disasters when, as I was saying to Sumit, he stepped in, donated land, advised for financial reforms and so on. There were other political crises, the most famous of which involved Erosio. So he shepherded it through many crises in its life. Now this is about the medical college. Much like Hindu College, which had come close to being aborted due to the opposition of conservative society to the involvement of Ram Mohan Roy, Medical College was in a similar predicament with much the same sections of society objecting to dissection. The same person who had facilitated the foundation of Hindu College by persuading Ram Mohan Roy to step aside now performed the same role for Medical College by convincing Hindu parents to renounce their objections and then recruiting their wards to be parents of the college. It was not an easy job since, other than the prejudice, the admission criteria for the students included a reading and writing knowledge of the English language, similar language of Bengali and Hindustani, and be proficient in arithmetic. Fortunately, though, Hare's efforts bore fruit in this grim hour of crisis. 49 young men, many of whom students of Hare School, had their characters and antecedents personally certified by Hare. Dr. Bramley, the first principal of Medical College, paid fulsome tribute to Hare in his report to the government, acknowledging that with Mr. Hare's influence, any attempt to form a Hindu medical class would have been futile. He dubbed Hare as the zealous coadjutor and invaluable assistant through whose instrumentality chiefly the initial difficulties were surmounted in the beginning of Medical College. Scarcely had the order of the government for the institution of the college appeared before this gentleman, prompted by dictates of his own benevolent spirit, having ascertained the objects of undertaking and being convinced of the vast benefits likely to accrue from it, afforded me his influence in the furtherance of its ends. Just like Hindu College, Medical College had become financially, got into in financial distress, and Hare had to become secretary for 2 years to stabilize it.
So coming back to my question, a little bit about the man and his other interests other than education, if you can throw some light.
Right. So it's very, very difficult to speak of David Hare. As a man, we have to rely on the impressions recorded by other people around him.
And therefore, what did his peers think of him, if that's what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes. He did not leave any letter or diary or document. He was an extremely self-effacing person who held himself back from the limelight. So the impressions of others is that other than the Christian missionaries, he did not have any enemy. Most of them were beholden to him for the many favors that he had done them. And more than that, I want to tell you a little bit about what people, somewhat famous people, down the centuries have said about David Hare. Tagore referred to Hare as a great-souled Englishman who came very near to us. Swami Vivekananda, addressing an American audience, inquired of his audience if they ever had heard of David Hare, who had dedicated so much of his life to education. Surendranath Banerjee, noted nationalist leader and a founding member as well as president of the Indian National Congress, wrote in 1925 that the memory of David Hare is still adored, though more than 2 generations have elapsed since his death.
Wonderful. I'm sure the audience will have a couple of questions, and I don't want to take away and hog all the limelight, but I'd like to ask one last question before I hand this over to the audience. This has nothing to do with the book. You talked about a secular educationist in India, and this is perhaps a hypothetical question. In the light of what we are seeing of education in India today, with all these exams getting postponed, secularism being questioned, how do you think, since you studied Hare so well, what would be his biggest challenge today if he were to be reborn in 2024 and come back to India to look at the education and secularism from your perspective of looking at Hare?
Well, you see, Hare was quite a master at reconciling opinions of people with very different ideas and still working from them. He worked, for example, with Ram Mohan Roy, the most liberal Bengali of his day, as well as with Raja Radhakanto Deb, the most conservative Bengali of his day, who opposed Ram Mohan's Shoti. So Radhakanta Dev was an arch reactionary conservative, whereas Rammohan is this liberal, and Hare has no problems working with both of them. And both of them, no, Rammohan not Rammohan because he was dead by them, but Radhakanta Dev turns up at his funeral as well. Now, there are many, many such instances in which, during the De Rosio problem, for example, in which Hare was able to reconcile violently opposing opinions and ensure that the college goes on, that the show goes on. So on the one hand, there is that. But on the other hand, I don't think that Hare's time and his milieu admitted of as much corruption and as much vested interest as is the case today. So I'd say that the ball is in the air. I don't know what you would have made of it.
Well, on that happy note, I think, ladies and gentlemen, please give a big hand to Sarojesh.
Thank you.
I hope we've been able to inspire to at least read the book. We don't want to give everything away, but I'm sure some of you in the audience will have more questions and more, I think, curious questions than the ones I've been able to conjure. So it's over to you. And if we can have a mic, Shivanti, if we can have a mic that's given. No, you need that.
Oh, true, I need that.
Actually, you have said that Hare passed away in 1842. And Vidyasagar was born in 1820. And Bethune School or college was established in 1849. I would like to know Hare's opinion on women's education.
So, Amidadi, as I said a few minutes ago, that it is very difficult to come across Hare's own views because he did not leave anything. Nothing has survived. Now, he was certainly very supportive of women's education in Calcutta during his time, but he did not take any direct initiative in that regard because all the women's education during that time were spearheaded by missionary people whom Hare did not like in the first place. There is a scintillating passage left by a member of the Young Bengal, about whom you would know, of the Young Bengal sect, quoting Hare that he would like to start a women's school, not a women's college, but a women's school very soon. But I have no idea what came of it.
Sarojesh,
Thank you.
did he have, David Hare, any arch rivals?
Would you pass the mic on to the gentleman at the back?
No, except for the Christian missionaries of his time. And that too was not an overt hostility. It only came out when they refused him permission to be buried. Now, during his lifetime, there is not really much that either they did to obstruct Hare or he did to obstruct them. He just fiercely protected his own classrooms, whichever ones they were, from religious influence.
I need some clarity on a very unfortunate fact that he didn't have a burial place. I mean, there were other people during that time who were like pagans, like you talk about Charles Stewart, who had the sobriquet Hindu Stewart, or even David Octonelli, or even David Hare's own student, De Rosio. They all were buried, in cemeteries. Why was it that, what did he do so wrong that he didn't even get a place, not even inside the Scottish cemetery? That was when operational at that time, I believe.
I couldn't say. You would have to ask the missionaries of those days. But I would imagine he didn't do anything. He didn't get up on a pulpit and abuse the missionary interest, or he didn't lead a team of urchins to their place. He didn't do, in that sense, he didn't do anything. But he made his displeasure and his avoidance of them well known throughout his life. So that's probably through his actions. So that's probably what caused it.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm just interested in the structure of his schools because there are students of various ages, from young to little grown up, maybe in their teens or maybe late teens, and at the same time there was no endpoint exam as far as I can remember. There's no end, like matriculation. Matric started probably, I think. Our medical college was 1829. So I think that time many people admitted without matriculation.
Okay, are you talking about the medical college?
Yes. Structure of David Hare School. I mean,
okay.
Where the,
Okay, I will tell you.
Yeah, what the classes, and how many classes with the class 1 to 10, 1 to 8, or how they eventually pass, what exam they actually passed, because it was spanned over a period of nearly 30 years. So I think
yes,
this is the structure of education and the qualification, awarded. That's what I'm interested in.
Yes, that was two societies were formed in Kolkata at around that time in the 1820s, in the early 1820s. One of them was the Calcutta School Society. Now, all of David Hare's schools were affiliated to the Calcutta School Society. And the other society, very influential society of that time, was the Calcutta School Book Society. Because there were no school books that were appropriate. As I was reading out from the books, there was no history taught, there was no geography taught, there was no mathematics taught. So all these books had to be written. Now, the structure that you are talking about, Taposa, was followed by Hare, had been sort of fashioned by the missionaries in the Srirampur schools, without, of course, the religious element. So he took that structure and he mostly implemented it. There were two important differences. Apart from deleting the religious elements, there were two important differences in Hare schools compared to the Srirampur schools. Number one was there were examinations held in the houses, in large houses, such as that of Radhakanto Dev, every year. So that was held. Examinations, after which students would be promoted to the next class. And secondly, rather curiously, Hare made Bengali mandatory, even for his English medium schools. Of his 6 schools, 3 were English medium, 3 were Bengali medium, but for the English medium schools, Hare said you have to know Bengali. So they were required to attend classes at the Bengali medium school before attending to their English medium schools. So he did not want a completely foreign idea of education to be imposed in a native environment, which would lead to communication gaps, resentment, and so on and so forth. The idea of examinations was introduced by the Calcutta School Book Society, and all the schools affiliated to Calcutta School Society had to undergo their students. Students of those had to undergo the examinations. But having said that, Tabuza, they were not as strict as you would imagine happens today.
How would they define that a person have ended his school life?
There was a specific number of years rather than a specific set of goals. For example, from now, these days, you have to pass this exam or that exam to be considered having passed your school or college. In terms of school exams of that time, if you had gone to school for 10 years or 12 years, I don't know the exact, I can't offhand recollect the number of years, you would be considered being done with your school curriculum. As far as the Hindu college was concerned, the Hindu college had 2 parts, the school and the college. So you would directly go to the college from the school once you had passed Past the number of years. And as I just said, when medical college admissions were being taken, a very large number of them were Hindu college graduates.
You talk about this secular, sensitive, caring person at that time, and surrounded by what can best be described as racist, rapist, traders, colonialists, trying to... Is there any information anywhere at all about how this character developed? Either in his background before he came to India or over here, because you do say he doesn't write about anything, but is there any information about him available to show what led to this development of this person?
So I can only offer you some speculation, Jayant. Please sit. As I said, that there is no definite information available about him because he did not leave too many documents. But he was a Scotsman. The Scots have had a much longer tradition of public education than even England, much longer. Sometime in the 16th century, the Scots made it mandatory for the children of their baronial families to go to school, and shortly afterwards, within the 17th century, for all children to go to school. Now, in England, that did not even happen until the 19th century. Now, the Scottish Revolution, knowledge was far more widespread and dispersed in Scottish society than there was in England. The Scots had 5 leading universities when the English only had Oxford and Cambridge. Right, the Scots almost invented the social sciences. So, as I said, I can only offer you speculation. He comes from a background and from the very, very liberal inheritance of a nation that has been immersed in progressive values for a very long time. Now, you might well ask, why were not all Scots like this? And unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that. But in his case, this must have been the reason.
Okay, one last thing.
Yeah, sure.
Somewhere in the book you've mentioned that if students didn't show up, he wanted to know why, and he would go and find out, and he'd bring them into to attend school or college or whatever. Do you see vice chancellors and principals doing that kind of thing now? I mean,
they would be taken to prison and prosecuted if they tried to do that. No, but
Sorry.
no,
No, go ahead. You were saying something.
I was just going to say that in general, the idea of pastoral care has diminished with more and more of education getting institutionalized. And these days, other than that issue, no one really takes all that much interest. I mean, it would be, such a person would be dubbed insane, frankly, if that were to be observed.
But Jen, going back, I mean, at our time, being caned in school was quite a normal thing. And I remember our principal even giving you the choice of the 3 canes, depending on that. And what was beautiful is, once you bent and he whacked you, he would say, gentlemen, make sure that you don't do this again. We are friends. Something like that. I was trashed on so badly, I had to cover my face at home, lest my mother gets to know and I embarrass my teacher, because I didn't want my mother to know that he trashed me, not because I was embarrassed. But I think it's completely changed. None of us ever, felt, abused or something like that. It was so much part of our, growing up years, and it was part of our, and being trashed at home too by the parents. I think that was also. Yeah, sorry, last question.
Part to the question.
Sarojesh, the Hindu college or the Presidency College shares the same campus with Hare School, both of which he established. Did he teach at the school and the college as well?
No, Parthuda, but I'm going to take a little liberty with your question and tell you of something else. The Hindu college originally was set up in a rented house. And there it ran into financial difficulties. And they petitioned the government for support, which was not forthcoming. So Hare was able to work with the government and come up with an arrangement in which Hindu college and Sanskrit college shared the same premises, which is the present premises of the Sanskrit college. A guardrail divided the entrance into two colleges, and the Sanskrit college, as you know, taught Sanskrit, which nobody was interested in because there were no jobs to be had in Sanskrit. It was, completely antediluvian and so on and so forth. And the interesting part is that that guardrail had to be moved every year to the left to allow for more and more students of the Hindu college and almost none of the Sanskrit college. Now, coming back to your question about these two schools, no, he was not a classroom teacher. It led, someone asked me, I think you asked me about some enmity that he might have contracted with the Christian missionaries. After his death, some of his Christian missionary friends let it out that he wasn't literate, that he was illiterate, he didn't teach, he couldn't read or write and all that, which is not true because there are bits and pieces of his writing left which show him as much more than just literate, almost a delight to read. So no, he didn't teach, but there is a moving account of him patrolling the premises of the school and the college almost on a daily basis from 9 in the morning to 6 in the evening till the classes were on to see what was happening to the children, to the teachers and so on, which makes for the fact that he was a daily presence, but he didn't teach.
Well, keeping in mind of time, I think we've done justice. I want to thank Sarojesh for all your hard work to be able to bring this book, and on behalf of all our members and their guests, I do wish this is just the beginning of many more such interesting facts that you bring to light through your writing. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You've been a great, great audience, and thank you for your questions. And may I hand this back to Parthoda, you? Or?
Adi to offer a bouquet flower to our guest speaker today. And we have something more as a token of our appreciation. Romudi, can I request you to offer a bouquet of flowers to Sumit? Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sarojesh.